OST 2016. This is interviews, music reviews, and more. This is The Hotter Show.
What is up, everybody? We are rolling audio here today in episode 348 of The Hotter Show. I hope you guys are doing absolutely fantastic. Thank you so very much for tuning in and clicking that play button on today's episode of the podcast. I've got a kick-ass episode for you here today, as I do every single week right here on The Hotter Show. I am sitting down with my old buddy, Gord Cameron, who is the bassist of the mighty Beguiler. And this conversation was a long time coming because I've known Gord for... a very long time, almost 10 years at this point. I would say at least 8 to 10 years in that ballpark there, because I met him a very long time ago in my old life when I was at the music store, Gigs Music there. So we have a lot to talk about. His early days in music and kind of what got him started with playing music, influences, forming his first band, being in the band Kraign, who were a fantastic metal band, joining Beguiler, how that whole experience has been, some favorite past shows that he's done, and just a lot of really fun talk about his overall musical journey. So definitely look forward to the entirety of this kick-ass conversation with Gord. Before we jump into it, I want to thank everybody for their support on last week's episode of the show. My chat with Robert and Nick from Sticks and Stones, definitely a really fun conversation. They were great guests and are some super talented musicians. So go check out Sticks and Stones. They deserve your support. And if you haven't checked out that episode, I do implore you to go do so because it was a lot of fun. The whole thing of Dave Mustaine being featured on a Drake song just was utterly hilarious. So go back and check that out for sure. And stay tuned for the entirety of this fantastic episode with Gord Cameron from Beguiler. Before we jump in, we're going to take a quick second to hear a word from the sponsors who are helping the Hotter Show grow. Let's check it out. It has been a long time coming, but we've got Gord Cameron here from Beguiler. Gord, man, what's up, buddy? It's good to see you.
Fuck, man, it's good to be back. It's good to finally be here. Well, actually, no, because we were here 2 months ago.
It was you and Jacob. Now it's just you.
Yeah, now it's just me. First time the Gord man cometh.
The Gord man cometh. I like that.
Yeah.
That's it, man. Well, dude, it's funny because we've been shooting this shit for a bit now, and it's funny to think 10 years ago or some shit was the first time I ever met you. When shouts to Mason when he brought you into the store. Little did I know, 10 years into the future, we'd be having our first podcast.
Man, it's been a crazy ride, man. Honestly, the shit I've done in the last 10 years and never would have thought I'd have done. And here we are, baby. Still here. Fucking still here.
Still here, yeah. Still rocking and rolling, still doing the music thing.
Still musicking, still bassing, still thumping, still doing it.
Still smacking that low end thump. That's it, man. That's it. Well, let's go back for a minute here because I'm curious. Where did it start for you with music? What was the first music that you ever heard? What kind of got the gears turning for that?
Oh, man. It's such a weird tie because it's two different styles, but you had John Paul Jones from Zeppelin and David Ellefson from Megadeth. Because man, that Peace Sells album, I don't know how much Megadeth you know, but Peace Sells, that was one of the first metal albums I ever heard, and it just floored me. The bass on that album is insane.
Yeah, that's a beast. David Ellefson, as much as it kind of sucks how his career with Megadeth ended.
Yeah.
Ended for the third time now, whatever.
Something like that.
I'm sure he'll be back at some point. But actually maybe not. I think I read Dave Mustaine was just it's not happening. He's not going
No,
back
it's done. It's over.
Yeah, I don't know. But
I still appreciate that work though.
Oh, of course, yeah. Yeah, maybe he did some weird, sketchy shit, but it's you can appreciate the fact that the guy was a beast on the bass. you know, and he was an influential guy. But you mentioned John Paul Jones there. That's a guy who, I mean, he's one of the fucking greats of all time. So was it specifically like, was there a specific record from Zeppelin that, because I'm assuming it was Zeppelin, like when you know you heard him with, obviously.
Oh man,
was there a specific record that you really dug, or?
For me personally, I think it would have to be either Zeppelin 4, or Physical Graffiti.
Okay.
Because again, I don't know how much Zeppelin you know, but Physical Graffiti was one of those albums where like every song is Zeppelin, but like when you listen to them or like when you listen to it, they're all kind of their own vibes, but it's still that sound. And just that man knew how to just walk the bass, and he knew how to be a bass player, man. But then the man also knew how to have flair and how to just shred. And you know, 12-year-old me was like, that's tight. Because like my parents, like my mom and dad, they weren't ever musically, like they never played instruments or anything, but like huge fans of music, just all kinds of shit, man. Like my parents had everything from like old country, like classic rock, psychedelic, fucking heavy metal, thrash metal. My dad was big into like late 70s, 80s punk rock and stuff like that. So that's where like my punk shit came from. When I was shortly after Megadeth, I discovered like the Misfits and Sex Pistols and stuff like that, and I was like, this is also fucking tight. Like
it all has its place, right?
Oh, dude,
it all has its place, and it's just funny. Like Physical Graffiti is one of those records too that, like, I mean, you look at the track listing for Physical Graffiti just as an example, and like you've got just you know, Trampled Underfoot and Cashmere, even just those, like those are two just fucking wild songs. You know, obviously it's not, maybe like, I really became a big fan of John Paul Jones with his work with Them Crooked Vultures.
Okay.
Because like that's, if you ever heard Them Crooked Vultures,
not too much of it.
It's cool stuff, because it's very, I don't want to say it's very John Paul Jones led, because that's not fair to Josh Homme, but like, man, like you can hear his influence in Them Crooked Vultures. If you're a John Paul Jones fan, you got to check out Them Crooked Vultures.
Yeah, man, I might have to dip back. I might have to. Got some homework to do.
That's it. Was there any song specifically from, like you mentioned, Peace Out? Was there any song specifically that like you really were like, oh shit, like this is
well,
my
like,
jam?
Wake Up Dead. I mean, the first 4 songs, man, like Wake Up Dead, The Conjuring, Peace Sells was probably the one, just that do 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 do, like that's cool, man. And it's so like it's its own thing, because it just, that's the intro, and then that's it. Like the rest of the song, like it's just, but he got to have that little, and I was like, I want to have that little diddle in music. A little diddle. as we call it in as we've tend to start calling it.
The little diddle. I like that. I like that. That's funny. When you were getting into the Megadeth, was there any of the other kind of the big 4 of metal that you got into as well, or did you pretty much go from that straight to like the punk stuff? Well,
Megadeth and Metallica, like hand in hand. I always loved Master of Puppets, man. As cliche as it sounds, like it's just, if you're a fan of metal and you don't like that album, it's kind of like, what the fuck is wrong
literally
with you? Fucking it laid the pathway, helped lay the pathway. Yeah. But like I also like, I'm more into Slayer now than I was, because there were some songs where like I was just kind of like, this just sounds like random nonsense, like I don't get it. But then there are other songs, but now looking back on it, it's like, fuck dude, if only, 13-year-old me knew what 27-year-old me was into now. Holy crap. Like
Dude, I say that all the time. Like if high school TJ could see the kind of stuff I was into now, I'd be disgusted with myself. Like
Same here, man. Absolutely.
Like I used to talk so much shit about bands like Lamb of God and stuff. I'd be like, oh bro, like, it's not even music. I was so fucking stubborn. But it's funny, like so I think something that a lot of people can appreciate about Metallica specifically, I mean, you got the trifecta of bass players, right? Like that's three very distinctive bass players. But so you were a Cliff Burton guy, obviously. Then I can
Cliff Burton and Jason Newsted, man,
Yeah.
especially like I know with And Justice for All, there's the whole controversy and all that, but like when you can actually hear what that, like when you actually see what that man's playing on that album, it's like shit. It was great. Black Album was good. Like everything he did with Metallica was awesome.
see, like I'm a huge Jason Newsted fan. So
yeah,
I'm like, but I dig like Load. Like Load's my favorite Metallica record. So like
interesting.
I get shit for it all the time when I'm like, I don't even care, man. I love Load. I also love Puppets and fucking Ride the Lightning and like there's not a Metallica record I don't like. I'm one of those guys. But like you look at what Newsted did with his solo band, like, you know, there's he is a player kind of like Tom from Slayer too. He's another guy who like he doesn't really get a lot of props for how good of a bass player he actually is. Like I always thought like, oh, like he's just the guy who's yelling at me about God and stuff. Like he's not that great of a bass player. And then I remember we had a student at the store who was this kid who was just a massive fucking Slayer fan. He was learning to play bass. And I remember one time his teacher came up from the back and he was like, dude, you ever actually listen to Slayer's bass lines? I'm like, not really. Why? And he grabs a bass and starts playing. I can't remember what, it was like a really obscure Slayer song. And I was like, shit. He's like, yeah. Like, I always thought he was just like riding the E the whole time. But no, he's fucking like just
dude,
moving.
That's
he
what
also
I mean,
has the
like,
riffs, but
that's what I mean. Like Tom Rea, like he's doing vocals and playing that bass at the same time. Like that's to me I can't wrap my head around that, dude. How people can sing and play something that's like slightly off of what they're singing. Because even if I'm like jamming on my acoustic or something, or even just playing on my bass and I'm trying to like sing along with a melody, I'll still like either choke my words or choke the line playing it. Try and fucking, I can't do it.
it's like I think in my experience, singing and playing bass is even harder. Like I find like a lot of bassist vocalists like don't get the respect they deserve because like you're playing, it's different from just, oh, I'm strumming and playing a few chords. It's like, no, like there's a little more going on. Like, yeah, when you're playing heavy music, you can kind of just, ride the E or the D or whatever the fuck, so to speak, depending on what tuning you're in, obviously. But like, it's like, I don't think they get a lot of credit for that. Like Tom Rea is another guy, like where he just like, it's wild to really, and even like some punk basses. I had this conversation with John from Nothing Serious like years ago, where I was like, man, I never really understood like how heavy some punk bass lines actually are. Like, because you don't really think of it. It's like you think of punk bass and you're thinking of like, like Fat Mike or like oh my gosh, I'm gonna forget his name. The guy from Green Day. The hell's his name?
Oh, Mike Dirt.
Mike Dirt. Like you think of like, you don't think of like that heavy, distorted bass. With you, do you have because your bass tone is very what I really have always liked about your bass tone is like you're not like you have that happy medium where you're not super distorted, because I find I like bass tone that's very like, that's why I was such a big fan of Newsted. He didn't really dirty his bass up too much. It was very kind of, he could, and when he needed to, he did. But like, there's nothing I love more, and that's another David Ellefson thing too, right? Where like he doesn't really distort his bass that much. Like when you pull it out of the mix, he just kind of lets it speak for itself. Do you have a preference in that, or do you kind of just whatever fits the song.
So for doing the Kraign stuff, because of what Marty and Sean were writing and how the bass was kind of following more what the guitar riffs were playing, I needed a tone that was, when we go into the breakdowns and kind of ride like the open notes and stuff and kind of do our thing, I needed it to be like still punchy, and I love a clanky sound, man. I don't know, it just makes me smile listening to a bass that cuts through the mix, especially in metal. And go like with David Elfison and like all the guys from like the earlier bands and stuff, like, yeah, they had monstrous tone without even needing to put any gain or overdrive or anything on it. And I love that because it's more or less just letting their bass and the amp do all the work. And how they're playing too. But with Kraign, it was one thing, and then Beguiler, it's, man, that dark glass, because like I usually play the Sans amp, and like some people, Reddit people will argue there's like, oh, it's like at the end of the day, like there's not really a big difference. Like, there's a difference.
Oh, there's a difference. That's a really ignorant thing to say. There's a big difference.
That dark glass, man, like when we're just jamming, like when they're like, okay, like, you know, everybody strum, test sound, just like that. Oh, I love it.
Sounds like like the one thing I just, when it's a really good bass tone and you just hit that open, it needs to sound like, you ever like listened really closely to like an open back piano before? You just hit one key and it just fucking like, I'm like, it needs to sound like that, but like dirty. Like that's me. I mean. I'm like, you know,
it's gnarly, dude. Like that, the dark glass. That Scott, you know, thanks to Scott for that pedal, because he had just got. I think he played a handful of shows with it while he was still playing bass, and then when they parted ways with Miller and Scott moved up back to guitar, because he originally played guitar in all the other bands with Jacob. And then it's like, oh, I went from having one bass rig to 2 full bass rigs, and then it was like, well, let's like Frankenstein something together, and then it was just that dark glass through the trainer, though, man, that sounds gnarly. Sounds fuck. I love it, man. But that's for what we do with Beguiler. It needs to be that aggressive kind of, I'm trying to think of a word, I guess, attack to it.
Yeah, like it cuts through, but it's not like, because like I find with heavier stuff, sometimes the bass can get very muddy. Yeah. Like it's almost like it's buried. And like the second you hear heavy stuff where the bass really cuts through, that's what you want, right? I want to be able to hear what's going on, you know?
One of my favorite examples of like distorted bass that like cuts through a mix very well, but like at sometimes like it's still like just blends perfectly in the background and like still holds that low end, but like when it needs to like cut through for like a cool little diddle riff, man, here and there, Black Dahlia Murder bass, man, is where it's at. Like they've had a score of bass players now, but each one's a slight step up from the last, which I really like, because you get all different kinds of styles and stuff. And the last 2 guys they've had were both finger style, but like when I was listening to it, I was like, that sounds like a pick, and then you see it live and you're like, nah, dude, that's finger style. And that was just my bass. I was like, ugh. Awesome.
It's gnarly, the difference, though, eh? Like it's one of those things that was one thing with me. Like when I didn't really understand the difference. I thought it was just like a personal preference thing, right? But like you see some guys who just like one of the gnarliest bass tones that I ever heard. That was another guy. Like I don't think he gets a lot of credit because of the band he's in, but it's Gabe from Whitechapel. He plays a 4-string bass in like whatever fucking tuning they're playing in these days. And like this dude just has like a normal scale 4-string, like SG style bass. and he has this super heavy fucking pick, and he just gong. And like, I remember when I first heard, not Saw is the Law, Our Endless War, one of the first opening notes, I thought it was a guitar. And then I saw a live video and I'm like, no, that's the fucking bass. Like, holy shit. Like,
yeah, man.
But it cuts through so much. I was like, oh, that's the bass. I thought it was a guitar. Holy shit.
No, like, another great example of fucking crushing. And like, we could talk about crushing tone for hours and hours and hours. Like, but I also find too that, like, depending on what I'm playing, like, if I'm just kind of sitting at home, just kind of jamming, because like I like to play things that aren't metal too, and I really, really enjoy when you can have a really nice kind of, not like flat, but a really nice, big, fat, warm tone, like where it's just like it fills out the room, and you're just like, oh, like man, the bass for Dazed and Confused.
Yeah, just nice, big, warm tone.
It's so fat, like.
And there's nothing like just being able to sit. Like, I think there's nothing I love more when it comes. Like, I'm not going to pretend I'm a bass player, but like, the first time I sat down with a real bass rig and played "My Friend of Misery," that opening, part, because that's one of my favorite pieces of music ever written. Not just on bass, but in general. Yeah. And like, when you have a good bass tone that's clean and you're playing that part, it is just, you just get transported to another world. Same with Dazed and Confused. Like, just that, it's just, it fills the room, and it's like, oh, it like makes your, I don't even know how to explain it. Just like, it like rattles your bones. You're like, shit, like this.
It gives you goosebumps, bro. It gives you goosebumps. Yeah.
It's a very underrated way to express yourself. I think bass is like, it's very, like, there are times where I'll pay more attention to what's going on with the bass than anything. And like, I'm a riff guy, but like, when I hear a really good bass riff, I'm just like, shit, man. Or a doodly, whatever, it's like, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. But you mentioned a bit ago there about Kraign and Beguiler, which obviously Kraign was the band you were previously in that a lot of people would know you from who listen to this show. But then also now, of course, you're playing with Beguiler, which is kind of somewhat of a recent thing. And we're very excited about the future to hear you ripping bass with Beguiler there. But let's go back a bit here. So you're young Gord back in the day. Mm-hmm. You're listening to Megadeth and Led Zeppelin, and then you had a little punk phase and stuff like that. When did you start playing bass, and what was the music you were listening to when you finally were like, okay, I want to like pick up an instrument?
I think I would have been grade 9 when I got my first bass, just like a Fender. I got like a J bass at the time. Which I didn't do my research. I just wanted to play. So like I realized, oh, if you're gonna do like punk, use a P bass. But then you get on Google and other people are like, nah, man, like use whatever you want. Like, so I was like, okay, whatever. So I used the J bass for a while, and at the time, Rise Against, man, that was like one of the big, because like especially the first decade of that band, man, like from 2000 to 2010, 11, like I think that's their like golden era. I like their stuff now, but it's just more kind of like alt rock than punk because they're old now.
Yeah, it's like dad rock now, or whatever the hell the kids call it.
Basically. But like if you listen to like the bass intro to Like the Angel, that's one of their, I guess, revolutions per minute. Anyway, that's got some gnarly. And when you watch him play, his wrist, like his pick hand, it looks like it's made of rubber. Like he looks like he's just like throwing it at the fucking at his strings, man. Like it's crazy watching this man play. It was cool to see him play live too. Saw that back in, I think I was in grade 12 when I saw them.
That's fucking sweet. Did you like take any lessons or anything, or were you all self-taught?
No, my buddy, like our friend Nick, the guy I was telling you about, we were chatting earlier. He kind of showed me how to read tab, and I went from there.
Right on. And you had mentioned that you started with the J bass. Do you? Because I know that you still like play rock the J basses. Is that just at this point you're just so used to it, or have you tried the P bass setup? Like, do you really have a preference between the two, or?
I like the J bass setup. I think more just because I've been playing it a lot longer, and also with the last few years now, I've been playing the 5 strings, and that was definitely like I always wanted to play the fives, but then using it in Kraign, like I tuned it really weird. Like I basically did so like instead of the BEADG for like the standard tuning, I would just tune my top 5 strings to the top 5 strings on the guitar and
Oh,
match it.
okay.
Yeah, and try to match it as best. So I was using the 6 string setup on my 5 just because it
Right.
had the longer scale. So
Interesting. Okay. So
yeah.
was there a reason you did that, or it was just strictly
To
for
tune
ease of? Yeah.
for playing in drop B, like I could just use a regular, like I use a little bit of a heavier gauge, but like for all the drop C songs, because of how like if you tune that with a regular bass, it'll just like the tension on the neck, man, the strain and the warp, like it was so bad for it. But when you get the 6 string, I think when we researched it, it was it just had a little less tension than like your standard like bass string. So if we're playing in C, and my Sans amp was doing all the work for tones, so it still sounded good live.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of. I'll never forget like when I would have guys come in with their 4 strings and be like, "Oh, I want to put like a 165 on this and like
Jeebus.
tune it down," and I'm like, "Fuck, boys, like this is gonna just like this is gonna you'd have to cut the nut out like triple size that it was just to get it to fit. Like I'd have to hollow out the tuning head sometimes too. Like just Jesus, guys, what are we doing here? Like just,
That's awful, man. I've never even fathomed that thought because I also there's a part of me that's like if I go into a music store, especially like now, if I go into a store and I'm like, yeah, man, like I want to put a 160 gauge on this on my J bass, the guy's gonna look at me and be like, "How old are you?" You know what I mean? Like,
right. It's like, what are we doing? Yeah.
what are you doing? What are you doing, guy? How
Well,
long
now
you
there's
been?
so much shit too where they make like balanced strings and stuff. Like there's so much just wild shit out there now. Even just because I've been so out of the loop, right? Like I hear about stuff now and I'm just like, what? Like it actually works? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, fuck, okay. Like,
So when we play live, we play in technically right now our set is 3 different tunings. So we have a few songs from the earlier releases, which are all in drop A, which is what our guitars are tuned to currently. And then the Edorath stuff, 2 of the songs are no. 3 of the songs are G and 1 of them is G sharp. So what we did rather than because you'd ruin your guitar after the first, the first show you did doing that, like tuning. That's crazy. So we ended up getting the drop pedals from Digitech, and I'd heard of them and like I'd seen other bands kind of use them, but like I was always like, well, I don't know, man. Like you just tune it to that. It sounds better. But like after playing with it for these last couple of shows, like over the last year, it you can't tell the difference live.
I remember where I had seen a band that used those. And afterwards, I remember I was talking to them and I was like, man, like that's so gnarly. Like you guys tuned down that low. And like, cause I was a baritone guy, right? Like that's like some of my favorite shit. Like, and, the guy was like, I think he was like putting away his guitar and like, I think he like strummed it or something. And I heard that it was in like drop D. And I was like, like what? And he was like, oh yeah, bro, we used to Digitech drop downs for everything. I don't even touch my guitar tuners. I was like, huh? Like, and I was just like, I wouldn't, because, back 15, 16, 17 years ago, they were not that tight. Like when I was playing that low, like you couldn't use a Digitech drop tuner. It just didn't sound the same. And I don't know what changed over a few years, but they sound fucking awesome now. They work really well.
It's crazy how far how far the music gear has come in the last like 5 years, man.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
That's it. I walk into a music store now, man, and I'm just like, I have no idea what's going on.
Dude,
like,
half the store, you look around a music store now, half of it's computers.
Yeah. You look at like some of the amps they have now and stuff, and I'm just like, wait, what does this thing do? Like what? Like it's just what, I don't know. It blows my freaking mind. Like I see what they're doing now too with like bedroom setup stuff, right? Like just like the Boss katanas, like those things blow my fucking mind with how good they sound for being these little, oh yeah, this is like a little bedroom amp. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's going to sound like a Line 6 or something. And no, it sounds fucking amazing. It's just wild. Freaking wild. But going back for a minute here. So once you started, playing and kind of figuring your stuff out, did you join a band right away, or how did that all unfold?
Nick and Steven at the time were just jamming guitar and drums, and I was like, you guys need someone to jam with? And they were like, yeah, we don't have anybody who plays bass, come play bass. And then yeah, pretty much from there, we never, like, that band never really left Steven's basement. We did maybe one or two shows at BHS, and I think we played the Atria one time for a really, really, really sketchy Battle of the Bands. Like, it was...
Those were the best. The sketchy Battle of the Bands, the Atria? Come on.
Actually, sorry. I'm going to correct you. It wasn't the Atria, it was the Diesel Room.
Oh, the Diesel Room. Right. Okay.
So the upstairs.
Yeah, which, depending on who you ask, that's sketchier.
I mean, I've played it in recent years, and it's not like, it just needs to be like kind of like a lounge up there, not not like a showroom. Yeah,
it's a cool place. It's just, just back in the day, that was an interesting place to go see music at. It's a lot different than it used to be. I saw some gnarly shit there.
Scares me.
I saw some gnarly shit there back in the day.
What did you see there?
So this was back like, I mean, I saw it in the Active Violence there a couple of times, and I saw my boy played in this band called Devoked.
Oh, I've heard of Devoked.
You're Devoked, okay. So he was in like the original lineup of Devoked. Like he wrote a lot of the stuff. And I remember going to see them once, and it was not my thing. Like I was just going to hang out with him and support him. And, I remember I'm standing there and like, just like I had to go use the bathroom, and it was just like, I won't repeat some things that I saw, but it was just, it was sketchy. I was just like, I don't know if I want to come back here. Like, just, I don't know. It's not for me.
No, it's definitely not a place you take your family to dinner to, let alone your band to the show.
Yeah, it's that's wild. But that's funny though that you guys played at Battle of the Bands there. But so then transitioning from that, obviously you've mentioned Kraign a couple of times. When did it happen where you joined up with Kraign?
So that wasn't until like we basically, the three of us did that whole band cycle thing for all of high school, and then when Steven and Taylor started, so actually I don't know if you knew this or not, I was one of the founding members of Out of My League back in the day.
I had heard about this. Okay. So what was the original Out of My League? Because the original Out of
My League was me, Taylor, and Steven. That was the first. And originally, like, I wasn't really into, like, because they were really into, like, a Mice and Men and stuff like that. And I was still kind of like, well, I was like, I really like System of a Down, and, like, I'm starting to get into, like, Lamb of God and stuff like that. So, like, I'd be down to try stuff like this. And partially creative differences, partially I had a girlfriend who was like, it's cutting into our hanging out time. And at the time I was like, well, okay, see ya. But then, you know, fast forward, and then it was like, oh, so yeah, Steven ended up leaving to do that full time. And then I didn't want to jam with Nick anymore because he just got ridiculous. And I was like, okay. So I didn't do anything for, I was still sitting at home playing covers and like learning and still trying to like teach myself things and just keep the rust away, keep the chops up. And eventually I think I was at a party with Taylor, and he introduces me to this guy named Devin, and we'd leave the party and we're going back to Devin's house to hang out and, you know, smoke some of that devil's lettuce. And on the way back, Taylor's like, yeah, he's like, my buddy here plays bass. And I was kind of in the back of the car. I was like, what? And Devin's like, yeah, I'm putting a band together, man. Like, what do you think? He's like, we need a bass player. And I was like, I'm down to do anything, man, anything. Cause I've been watching Taylor do the Sound of My League stuff for like 2 years now. And I was like, I want to have a band. I want to play, man. Like, I'm tired of, well, I had a buddy who was really good at guitar and really good singer and really good lyricist. And he will remain nameless. But man just couldn't keep it in his pants. Like, he was a man whore, bro. Okay. He was a man whore. And like, in retrospect, looking back on him, like, I'm kind of glad, like, we never, because we were writing kind of like folky kind of music. Like, he was playing guitar and singing, and I was just kind of putting along on bass in the background, and it was cool stuff, man. Like, definitely like indie radio vibe kind of stuff. But then he ended up flaking off and chasing girls and shit, and I was like, okay. And then, yeah, I was introduced to these guys, met Marty and Sean, and I was like, okay, like, maybe, are these guys serious players though, or are they going to be more like, oh, I just kind of learning how to play guitar? And then Marty's like, yeah, check out this riff I wrote. He's just,
and it's that, and you're like,
And I was like, oh, I was so happy. Like, I was so happy I said yes to that, man. Cause like, for almost 5 years, like, we were a band, like, some of the fucking most fun I've ever had, man. Not just playing with people, but like hanging out with them. Like, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and some seriously badass music too.
Oh,
you know,
man,
like the Kraign record you guys dropped, that was some good shit, man. I remember, like, I mentioned earlier how, like, Marty, his old man and my old man just like know each other through work and stuff. And I don't remember how it came up in conversation when my dad was like, yeah, I checked out that Kraign band. And I was like, what? Like, because my father's not a music guy, let alone a heavy music guy. And I remember he was like, it was pretty cool stuff. And I was like, okay. And I think I remember I messaged Marty, and I was like, dude, like, he's not a fan of the scream. Why is he screaming at me? You know, classic. Like,
why is he screaming?
Why is he screaming at me? But yeah, I remember he was like, this is pretty ripping shit. And I was like, okay, like, that was out of left field. I remember I messaged Marty, and I was like, dude, it's Terry Hodder approved. And he was like, what? I was like, yeah. But
Terry Hodder approved.
Terry Hodder approved, man. That's it. Terry Hodder approved riffage, bro. But yeah, like, there was a lot of cool stuff you guys did. And I mean, you know, I'm glad that you got to have that experience, and there's some super talented cats there, you know. But obviously, transitioning from that,
mm-hmm.
you told me earlier that you were kind of going to take a bit of a step away from music a bit there, and then a month later something happened.
Yeah, roughly about, like I said, I think it was end of July of last year. That's when, like, Taylor was living a couple blocks down from me here in Oshawa, and he comes up after work one day and he's like, hey man, so, like, doing some lineup shuffling, and Scott's moving to guitar again, and we need we need a bass player. What do you think? And I'll be honest, man, like watching those guys play, like even like with my band, like playing, like I always wish like Kraign was more less metalcore, more deathcore. Because like I like the heavier shit, man. Like I love the music we did with Kraign. Like that was still some of my favorite music like I've got to be a part of in my life, man. Like it's insane what we did. But when I think about what I listen to in my like regular like life, it's this kind of stuff.
You're a heavy deathcore guy. That's
Yeah,
your
not even deathcore, like death metal, man. Like I just metal as the whole umbrella, because like I like some slam, I like some grindcore, I like black metal, man. Like and that's black metal, like stemming all the subgenres from that subgenre.
yeah,
And
the
now
like
you
80 subgenres of
oh, it's insane. But like I love it all, man. But like that specifically, death metal, deathcore, that's like my bread and butter, as we'll call it.
joining up with a band like Beguiler. I mean, like you mentioned, you know, watching them play and stuff. It's just like, you know, kind of wanting to maybe do that kind of a vibe. How was it for you though, coming into a situation where, I mean, you know, Beguiler is a band that's released a couple of EPs and they've played some serious shows and they've have momentum. How was that for you coming into it? Is that a little bit intimidating when you're jumping into a situation like that, or because you're boys, is it kind of
Nah,
just
man,
like,
even despite having Taylor in the band, who's like, I've known Taylor my whole life, and like I'd hung out and like not jam, but like I played Yu-Gi-Oh with Scott back when they were at the Space in Oshawa here, the rehearsal factory. That was about it though, and I only did that for like a summer or two, and then coming into it, it was still like, oh, there's so much to like get caught up to speed on, because like I had to learn basically half of each release they had put out at the time. And like their music, when you compare to Kraign's music, like both 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 styles are hard in their own ways. And what Taylor used to tell me, like, man, some of our like breakdowns are harder than our riffs. I was like, that doesn't make sense, dude. And no, dude, it it makes complete
yeah,
sense.
when you hear it, you're like, oh, that's what that
Well,
means.
a lot of it, man, like a lot of it, like any average listener can sit there and be like, oh, it's just like open notes with like the first fret, and it's like, nah, dude, that's all grime chords and all that jazz, like inverted chords like that, and you're like switching between. I don't know how they do it, man, but I can't. Even jamming the songs at home, like when I'm like, haha, I can play this on guitar. It's like, no, I can't. I can't.
You're like, oh, I got this. And then like 30 seconds in, you're like, ah, shit.
You're like, don't got it.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, man, it's been a lot. Even just like the last year, like it's been a wild experience.
And now obviously, like, you know, like, so when you joined the band, like with Ederath, like that record of that EP was like kind of already done and recorded, you know, so you didn't really get to put your fingerprints on that. But, you know, I'm assuming that the next release of it, you're going to be all over it. How excited are you to start ripping those songs and getting them out there?
Well, I will say this. I've tracked the first song. So
okay,
the ice has been broken, and getting to record, because like Jacob does all our pre-production and like even like does a lot of the mixes and stuff. Keegan ultimately like does the final mixes and masters and puts his like spicy touch on it to make us sound 110%. Like just getting the track with Jacob, and when I did bass tracks with Keegan, when I recorded with Kraign, it was just me and Keegan. So like a lot of the time it's like, oh, like what if we tried this? And I'm like, oh, but like, you know, we kind of thought this. And then it's like when you have someone there who's been a part of the whole writing process and you're taught a song, and then it's like you're playing the song, and having someone there who can help you out with that is just a lot. And he's just a treat to hang out with too. I love Jacob. He's just solid dude, and he's just awesome.
Yeah, I gotta imagine for doing especially pre-production stuff like that's gotta be so useful to have someone who really not that I mean Keegan's a fucking he's awesome, but like having someone who's involved with the band directly and like that's gotta be great to be able to have
dude.
that.
We're so privileged to have someone like him, like kind of like leading us in stuff. He's the Voltron of our band, so to speak.
I lost you there for a minute, but I think you were just saying Jacob's like the having him be kind of the leading you guys off. You had said something there, and I lost you there for a minute.
Yeah, he's kind of like the Voltron head of our band. So
I like that.
Yeah,
that's what I thought you said, but I was like, I don't know if I misheard you or I like that.
It's perfect. But yeah, then that's one of many songs to come down the pipe in the next year, man. Like we got some. Can't say too much, but we got some.
Of course.
We got some pretty interesting things in the works right now.
Is there going to be a song about Elden Ring? Be honest.
I can't comment.
Okay, say no more. Say no more. Okay.
Can't comment.
All right. But
all right. between me, between Scott, Jacob, and myself, yes, that game has consumed a lot of, especially me and Scott. Man, like we were actually playing that a little bit tonight before when I got home.
Oh, hilarious!
So.
That's awesome. I got to go back for a minute here because you mentioned something that just like triggered me. So you said that you and Scott used to play Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yes.
You guys still rip Yu-Gi-Oh once in a while, or?
So he resurrected the idea like a week or two ago, and he kept, we'd be in the chat and he'd be like, "Hey man, like everybody come over for 6:30." We're like, "All right, we'll be there at 6:30," and he'd message me and be like, "Hey man, come a little earlier and bring your cards."
Bring your deck, bro.
So we'd send each other to the Shadow Realm before, It's gonna start amping up though.
Nice. Okay, cool. I had to ask that because I just I very, very recently rediscovered like Yu-Gi-Oh and rediscovered like the Game Boy Advance games for Yu-Gi-Oh. So I've been ripping fucking the Eternal Duelist like a shit ton the last like couple of weeks. I'm like anytime I have downtime at work. And I'm just like, you said it and I was like, yo, obviously it's old Yu-Gi-Oh. Like I don't know anything about like the newer, but like that early days of Yu-Gi-Oh, man, that's the shit, man. That's
well, and ironically enough, like for us, it is the older days that we're kind of basing all of our current builds off of because man, this new meta it's when you have a 5-minute turn that literally beats me first turn and you can pull that hand like 8 out of 10 times in a duel. It's like, what?
Like, that's ridiculous. What happened to like, give me Exodia, give me fucking like, but I even like, it makes me laugh because I had my, so I was a warrior card guy. Right?
Oh, okay.
That was my like, and I actually, not that long ago, actually gave all my Yu-Gi-Oh cards to my a guy I know, and now I'm kind of regretting it. Now I'm like, fuck, man, I wish I had those cards now. Like, give me my Celtic Guardian. Give me my I had 4 Celtic Guardians, 4, and no matter what would happen, I would always find a way to somehow make it so that if I was gonna win, it was gonna be with Celtic Guardian doing something. Like just fucking every time.
Oh man.
I just beef them up with like 4 or 5 equips and just be like, fuck yeah, Celtic Guardian, let's go. My Celtic Guardian now has 3,400 attack power. Like, what the fuck?
And I'm standing there with my Karibo, like,
like, what is this guy doing? I'll do that on the Game Boy too. I'll have literally like my Celtic Guardian, then I'll have all of my magic like my magic card spaces filled up with equips for Celtic Guardian. It's just it's so stupid, but I'm like, that's my guy. I can't do it. That's my guy.
One of the decks Scott helped me build. It's the reason in 2003 or 4, whatever tournament it was. This deck is the reason the ban list exists.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of the Yadalock deck?
No, I have not.
Oh my goodness. It's so basically the two cards it revolves around, Chaos Emperor and Yatagarasu. And you use one card to nuke the field and everybody's hands. So you empty the field and both players' hands. And then if you have Sangan on the field, you bring Yatagarasu to your hand. Now to get this dragon out, it's a special summon. You get your normal summon. Now you play Yatagarasu. And I poke you for 200. But because I attack you directly, you skip your draw phase. So you have no field, no back row, no hand, and you can't draw. What do?
Not a goddamn thing.
Like, so from what I've read online, like the first time someone did that, like the tournament was just like, what is that? What?
That sounds ridiculous.
It's a fun deck to play with, man, and it cost me fucking nothing to build, so like literally cost me nothing.
That's freaking hilarious. I just like it's so funny to me because I'm just like I know so little about it, but like I just like I used to be so like so into it, you know, because like I watched like the anime back in the day and stuff too, right? So like, well, I don't even know if I call it an anime. Some people have said it's not. They're like, it's not even an anime, bro. It's like a cartoon anime. I'm like, I don't know the difference, but yeah, I was even like back into that back in the day and shit. And yeah, it's just funny.
I haven't like watched or played any like the handheld games or like console games or shows since like I was a kid, but like even with the rules and stuff, like it's all changed and evolved over the last 20 years.
It's
like
so different.
I remember what I remember with the cards that I have, and that's what I play.
That's what we have. We're just playing with the boys. Just it's not.
It's Street Yu-Gi-Oh, man. There's no rules.
Yeah, there's no rules, man. I do whatever I want.
If you want to
nuke all your cards.
If you want to run 3 pot of greed in your hand, bro, go ahead.
Go ahead, man. There's nothing like when you just get it and it's like I have a shitty deck build on the game because like I like the last I'm trying to unlock a specific card, and to get it I have to beat all these opponents in this one stage 10 times, and I'm like, oh yeah, I got this shit on lock. And then every once in a while I'll just draw all, because I have two pot of greeds, and then I have like, you know, all the classic like fucking like trap hole and change of heart and all that shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the last game I just did, I literally drew my 2 pot of greeds, my 2 trap holes, and then my change of heart. Is it 5, 6, and then whatever else I had. And I was like, oh shit, I got nothing. So then I fucking used both my pot of greeds, and I had all magic and trap cards still. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, this is ridiculous.
Way she goes, man. So it's the way she goes.
It's the way she goes with the cards. But something I wanted to talk to you about before we get ready to go here today. I know you are, I mean, it's no mistake from when I spoke with you guys that Beguiler is very much a band that is influenced by horror and things of that nature. I know from talking to you, you're also a big horror guy and cosplay and things of that nature too.
Oh yeah.
Do you have like, as an amateur working towards being a horror buff, do you have some favorite horror movies for me you can recommend?
Oh gosh. Okay, so I enjoy, like you were saying, with like listening to the podcast and listening to somebody else kind of like read a story, or you can definitely get more out of that than you do a movie, because a movie, it's like, here it is, take it or leave it.
Right.
And there's a lot of movies where I'm like, this is just blood and guts. There's no story, there's nothing. when you look at horror when it came out in like 70s and 80s and stuff, man, like there's a lot of cheesy horror, but a lot of it was still really good stories. And one of my favorite movies, man, was actually based off an H.P. Lovecraft story called Reanimator, if you've ever seen that.
I haven't. Okay, Reanimator.
Oh, okay. It's the perfect, in my opinion, it is the perfect crossover of kind of like horror, blood and guts, and kind of comedy too.
Okay.
There's some moments in that movie, man, that even I've seen that movie so many times and I'm still howling at the same parts. Like there's a scene in particular with a cat. Just wait.
Okay, I'm gonna look this up. I because I'm also a really big fan of like comedy horror too. Like I can appreciate just what you like. I mean, mainly there's one podcast I have gotten really into, and it's called Are You Scared of These Stories? And it's one of the dumbest podcasts you'll ever hear, but that's the point. Like, and it's just there'll be this absurd these three guys sitting around a campfire telling quote unquote stories, and they quote unquote capture paranormal events that happen around them. And it's like, they'll be like doing the voice of like a ghost or something, and they'll be saying just the most absurd shit, and they'll all be laughing in the background. So it's just a big joke, right? But like, it's so well done that I'm just like, they'll just be saying the most like absurd, like just disgusting, horrifying shit. But I'm just like, I can really appreciate the dark humor as well. So,
ooh, okay. You have to send me that. I'm down to check that out.
I'll link you. I have never laughed so hard on a podcast than I did of episode 11 of that show. I had to leave my apartment. I was laughing so hard. I thought I was gonna pass away. I was laughing so goddamn. There's one scene that just, and it's the dumbest shit, but just I couldn't breathe. Like my neighbors were asked if I was okay. Like I was fucking.
That's awesome. Man.
That's just absurd. But okay, Reanimator. Okay.
Yeah, definitely that one. Oh my goodness, there's so many, man. So there was one on Netflix I saw a couple years back. I don't know if it's still on there, but if it is, you should definitely check it out. It's called The Ritual, and it's about these four friends that go backpacking in the woods in Norway. And like, it's not like Blair Witch, like it's not like found footage, like it's a movie. But I was like on the edge of my seat for like most of this movie.
Okay.
And another movie, if you like kind of it's not really paranormal, it's more, I guess you could say, kind of crosses the line with Satan a little bit, but I found it was done very tastefully. Another one, if you haven't seen Hereditary.
Oh yeah, I loved Hereditary.
Yeah, okay,
it's really well done. I didn't like it until about halfway through, and I was like, "Oh shit, okay."
Oh, dude! after the scene with the youngest child, I remember like Steven showed me that movie when it was still in theaters, and like we were sitting in his basement. He found a good pirated version of it. We were sitting in his basement, and he doesn't have a finished basement. So like it's just pitch black. His tiny little computer screen is the only thing, like the only light, and I'm like sitting on the edge of it like for the whole thing, like loved it.
Yeah, it's a gnarly one for sure. There's a bunch of them because like what got me into horror really was like the Conjuring series of movies.
Yeah,
like that was, as with a lot of people, like just this. I was like, oh, horror movies are dumb. There's no story. And then like, I remember seeing those and I was like, oh, these are all connected. And like, okay. Like, so yeah, but Hereditary was like, yeah, that was fucked up.
Yeah,
but it was really well done. It was like,
Another one I really enjoyed at the time too was when the first Sinister movie came out.
Dude, don't even mention that movie in my presence.
Oh, why?
Oh my God, dude. I thought I told this story to you guys, or maybe I didn't. So there has been two occasions in my life where I have seen something that physically made me turn off my television and just like leave the room. Because I was just like, I'm done. I cannot continue watching this or experiencing this. One was Sinister. There's one scene in particular. And the other one was Silent Hill 4, The Room, which was a game. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
I think I've seen the first Silent Hill movie, but I was never into like the series, like the game.
yeah, but yeah. So Silent Hill 4, The Room, there's this one scene that like, so like the whole concept of Silent Hill 4, The Room is you're this dude who's in your apartment, but like your apartment basically becomes haunted as fuck. And there's a bunch of shit going on. I'm not going to sit here and explain the whole plot, but so basically you like leave your apartment through paranormal means and then you keep returning to it. And it's like more and more disturbing every time you return to your apartment. It's really good. It's really well done. And there's this one incident where it was a really intense level. And then I came back to the apartment and everything looked normal right away. And I was like, oh, thank God. And I left my bedroom and all I heard was like, like the sound of like kids. And I was like, what the fuck? And bro, I come around the corner and the way the camera is, like if you're walking out of a hallway, it's going to pan to like if you're coming around a corner, it's going to pan to like the corner so you can watch yourself come around the corner.
Yeah.
And I came and the camera panned and there was like the wall had like these like flesh colored like kids like inside the wall, like almost like behind the wallpaper trying to get out. And they were just like, and like, I don't know why it disturbed me so much. I think because I wasn't expecting it. I literally just stopped in my tracks, stared at it for about 35 seconds, got up, turned it off, removed the disc, put it away, and I didn't touch that game for 6 months. I was like, fuck no. It just, it messed me up for weeks, dude. I was like, what the fuck? But Sinister. So about halfway through, I've never finished Sinister, by the way, because of this. And I need to watch it because I really enjoyed it up to this point.
You got to finish it.
Yeah, I gotta watch it. But so I'm chilling. And you know, when he's like, it's like halfway through the movie, he's discovered this thing that's like in the background of all the videos and shit, right? And he there's this one scene where he's like looking at the image of the guy's face. And he like walks by the screen and the dude like pans to follow him. You know what I'm talking about? Like the dude on the screen. He like,
oh yeah,
him.
yeah.
And there's that split fucking quarter of a second where he fucking goes like this and he looks directly at the camera. The fucking like,
yeah, he's like,
dude.
Ethan Hawke, like he kind of like he looks at the projector and then you see the face turn and look at him, and then right as he's turning his head to look back at the screen, the face turns back to like the still.
Yeah. But to me, there was a split quarter of a second where as he's turning to follow Ethan Hawke, he looks directly at the camera. There's like a fucking, it's barely there. But for whatever reason, in that moment, I think I may have been a little high at the time. Yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it,
pierced your soul,
dude. Like my girl was asleep next to me, and I was looking, and to me that scene lasted for like 5 minutes. The way I'm remembering it, where he was just staring at me, and I turned it off. I was just like, nope, I'm done. Like, nope, done. Couldn't finish it. I couldn't sleep that night. I was like, nah, and like. She's like, I don't get it. It wasn't scary. I'm like, for whatever reason, it ruined me. I don't know why. Just the thought of, yo, this dude is looking at me. Just, and I haven't been able to bring myself to finish it, but I was really enjoying it too up to that point. But I got to finish it. It's such a stupid reason to not finish the movie. But I think you've inspired me. You saying Sinister, I'm gonna have to go back and watch it again.
You got to, man, because like I don't know. I just at the time, like there'd been so much stuff, like other movies that had came out that like were overhyped. And you go spend money and you go see them, and even as a kid, like it's like, oh, well, that's an hour and a half of my life I'm not getting back. Like, but going back to like Steven showing me shit, there was another series he showed me, and I just found out recently that there's been 2 more movies released in the series. And I'm very curious to see how those ones are. But the first 2, you ever watch VHS? Or heard of those movies?
No.
Okay. So it's found footage, but in my opinion, it's found footage done right. So what it is it the first movie is about this weird cult of people that they go around and they'll film people doing shit for like blackmail or money or whatever, and they get a call for a job where they're like, oh, this guy's gonna pay us all this money to go to this house and like get all these tapes, and like we just have to get the tapes. So they go to this house and they have to break into the house, and like there's like garbage bags all in the windows, and this house is just like a dump, but there's VHS tapes everywhere. Like they're on the walls, that they're in the closets, they're everywhere, and they're all like blank tapes. So they're like, well, what tapes are we supposed to look for? So they start looking, and they're like filming it as they're walking through. The guy puts the camera down. They walk into this one room. There's a dude who killed himself sitting in the chair, and there's just a TV like with a snowy screen. So the guy walks up and he puts the tape in, and now that's the first tape. And there's 5 different tapes you get to watch in this movie, and each one is more like more ridiculous than the last one, and they all touch on different genres of horror too. And it's like, and while these stories are being told, they're the story of the guys going to the house. There's shit going on in the house that like you see, and the second movie, it's more of the same. But it's 2 detectives looking for someone who's missing, but the person who's missing is, I'm not going to say, but that movie, there's 4 different tapes they show, but because they cut one tape out in the second movie, it gave the other 4 movies a bigger budget to play with. Watch that shit.
That does sound real. I'm going to have to look it up, because that actually sounds really cool. I like the idea of like the 4 different movies to like watch.
And it's, wait till you see the story that's going on outside of those movies. Like wait till you see how this whole thing, like, that's why I said there's 2 more movies they've came out with in recent years, and I'm like, shit, I got some homework to do. But those first 2 movies, man, I love both of them. They're so good.
That's freaking awesome. I dig it, man. Like I just, it's something that as time goes on, especially now that we're getting into they're with Bloody Disgusting. Okay, cool. Is that okay? So I just looked it up when you were saying that, because I was curious, and yeah, they I guess they were working with Bloody Disgusting or something like that.
Oh, that's shit! Cool. Right on.
That's cool. Right on. But anyway, yeah, like especially now heading into October and shit, you know, it's like it's time. I mean, I think spooky stuff should be all year round, but like it's especially, I'm gonna have to look that up. I appreciate you sharing that.
And man, like that's just some of the ones I can think of off the top of my head. Like I can name like all the classic ones, because to me, like I said, with like 70s, 80s horror, there's something about like the whole vibe of those movies and stuff, man. I just love them so much. And there's some really, 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 really out there movies that exist that people don't know exist. And it's like, the shock factor is off the charts, especially with a lot of the old school Italian directors, man. Like I have this one movie, it's called Beyond the Darkness. And actually the Black Dahlia murder, on their Nocturnal record, they wrote a song based on the movie called Death Mass Divine. And the movie is about a guy who does taxidermy. You know, he lives in he lives in this big villa house by himself, and his fiance dies mysteriously. So everybody's at the funeral and everybody's all sad, and he's kind of looking around, and he injects her with, I think, embalming fluid. And then after they bury her, he goes back to the cemetery, digs her up, takes her home, guts her, fucking basically makes a doll out of her so he can keep her forever, and then proceeds to have his way with the doll.
Proceeds to do fucked up shit.
But it's a wild movie, man. Like it's yeah, check it out too. There's so much crazy stuff I can send you, man. Like send you scores of shit.
And please do. I'm always down. I'm always down.
I'll send you way. Especially like you said with the fall season upon us, because I'm sorry, like to me, like I know August is still summer, but like August till like late November, to me it's like prime spooky
for sure
season.
Yeah, fall in general, I'm in. Let's go. Like we start getting into the spooky, we start slowly decorating for Halloween like late August. Like, let's go. It's time.
I respect the fuck out of that.
Yeah, we're there, man.
Dude, my girlfriend, she's already started buying the pumpkin spice latte mix for her coffee.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Like, get that shit going.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of the fall, I don't know if you noticed or saw the post or not, but we have a little weekend run we're doing in the fall.
I was just about to bring that up. That's awesome. But the
mini horror tour, I think they called it.
Mini horror tour.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Northern Horror Mini Tour.
That's
so, yeah, you guys are going to Newmarket, Montreal, and Oshawa.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. And it's who's on the bill? So there's Pillars of Autumn, Cruel Intent, Planet Killer, and then of course,
yeah, boys,
Beguiler.
Yeah.
That's gonna be fucking, man. People in that pit are gonna die,
dude. And like, shout out to fucking Planet Killer, because like they're coming all the way up they're coming from BC to do this weekend with us, man. Like, excited to have them. If you haven't checked them out, like they're another just really good heavy as balls band. Check them out. They slap.
Fucking right on. I'll have to definitely do that. That's that's gonna be bad. So if it's October 21st to the 23rd, folks. If you're in the Newmarket, Montreal, or Oshawa area, that's gonna be a good one.
The traveling the Slam Circus will be rolling into a town near you.
Slam Circus.
Yeah, man.
I dig it. That's awesome. Well, Gord, man, it's been a fucking joy getting to chat with you and catch up and learn a bit about you and talk some Yu-Gi-Oh! And horror and things like that. I appreciate the time, man.
I appreciate you having me on, man. Like, seriously, it's always a treat. It's great getting to talk to you, too.
Yeah, brother. All right. I'll have some links down below for Beguiler, folks, if you want to go check them out and check out the that Northern Horror Mini Tour. I'll have some links down below. Gord, thanks so much, man.
Thanks again, TJ. I really appreciate it.
All right, guys, there you have it. My conversation with Gord Cameron from the mighty Beguiler. Definitely a fun chat, getting to have a conversation with my old buddy, learning all about his musical journey. That was just a lot of fun. A little bit of a trip down memory lane a couple of times there, too. Big shout outs to everybody who we gave shout outs to in that conversation, as well as, of course, Gord and everybody over at the Beguiler camp. Definitely are at this point, I would say a bit of a harder show OG band. I would say Beguiler is. Big fans of them. And huge shout outs to everybody at the Beguiler camp. If you are listening to this and you're a fan of Beguiler, thank you so much for tuning in. I seriously appreciate it. Be sure to check out some other past episodes of the show. I have had some content from Beguiler. Not all that long ago, we did do a music showcase with Gord was on, as well as Jacob. So be sure to go check that out. And if you're a fan of heavier music, I've got lots of other kick-ass content here. But if you're just a fan of music in general, especially Ontario and Canadian music, check out some of the past episodes. Got a lot of stuff that you may enjoy. And if you would like to support the show, consider going a little step further hitting that subscribe button, leaving a like if you can, commenting, sharing, all that helps a lot. And be sure to follow us on the social media. We have Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, all under The Harder Show. And if you would like to come on the show or you have something you'd like to talk to me about, you can hit me up anytime at thehardershow@gmail.com. That's thehardershow@gmail.com. And if you would like to even take it that extra step further, consider joining The Harder Show Patreon, and you will get special content you will not find anywhere else, as well as a shout out on every single episode of the show, just like my hotheads are about to get right now. We, of course, have associate hothead Scott Duquette. Scott, thanks for all your support, brother. Scott has been a patron since 2019, literally one of the OG patrons here on The Harder Show. We have the Grey Rooms podcast. What else can I say that I haven't said about the Grey Rooms? Thank you guys so much for everything you have done for me. I am a proud member of the Grey Rooms Productions Network. We're fixing to take over the world, folks, so stay tuned for that. And the Grey Rooms is getting ready to come back with season 5. I am so excited for that. When I say getting ready, they're in the process of writing and recording and things of that nature. So we're very excited about that. Ronan Kamori. Ronan, thank you so very much for all the support. Wolf Delta Pi, thanks so much, brother. I appreciate you. Eric Phones. Eric, thank you, brother. I appreciate you so very much. Arthur Unk, head writer of the Grey Rooms podcast. Arthur, you know I love you, buddy. Thanks so much for everything. And Mike Quintero, who is the host of Mike's Mystery Mansion, a horror narration YouTube channel and podcast. Go check it out if you are into horror and paranormal content. Mike is a badass and definitely deserves your support, and is a wonderful supporter of this podcast. So big shouts to him and all of my Patreon supporters. To get a little shout out like that at the end of every single episode of The Harder Show, all you got to do is join The Harder Show Patreon at $1 a month. That's right, $1 a month. You will not even realize that's gone. Honestly, there are patrons I support that I don't even know that I'm supporting them anymore until I get like the monthly content or whatever it is they do. I'm like, huh? Why am I getting this for free? And then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm paying $1 a month. $1 or $5 or $10 are the tiers I have. They may not seem like that big of a deal, but let me tell you, there is nothing more incredible than being able to say, hey, I'm making a little bit of money doing something I love with this content that I love, that I can then take that money and put it directly back into the show, which is what I already have been doing, buying new equipment, buying new programs like I'm using right now to help make the show sound better, buy some, sound paneling and stuff to try and get rid of some of this echo situation that I've been dealing with over the last few months here, or last couple months at least. Things like that will help The Harder Show and will help The Harder Show grow, just like the fine sponsors we have here on The Harder Show the last little while. All of that helps, and the reality is money makes the world go around. And as much as I love doing this for free, and I will always have this show for free, that's never going to change, if I can make a little bit of scratchola to then put back into the show, it's just going to make everything better. So consider joining the Harder Show Patreon. But if not, I still just appreciate you listening. Thank you so very much, especially if you are still listening. You are seriously the best. Give yourself a round of applause. I did it for you. Don't worry about it. I got your back. With that, I'm going to sign off here today. Thank you guys so very much again for tuning in, and I will catch you next time on The Harder Show. Take it easy, guys.